Welcome to the show where we break down the mental health stigma, navigate sobriety with humor, and prove that it's okay to laugh while we heal. Let's get real, let's get honest, and maybe a little weird because growth is messy, but you don't have to do it alone. This is Sober Psychology. Welcome to the very first episode of Sober Psychology. My name is Michael. I'm a recovered alcoholic. I'm here to talk about mental health. I'm here to talk about addiction. I'm here to talk about what it's like to be in recovery, to be out of recovery, to navigate the treacherous and messy pathways of life. This is a mental health podcast where we focus on recovering out loud, talking about the issues, bringing to light the messy parts of life that no one wants to discuss. We're here to break down the stigma. The objective is to be loud, recover out loud so fewer people have to suffer and die in silence. Today, I'm going to give you an idea of what to expect and who this podcast is for. I'm going to introduce myself and give you a brief look into my testimony of recovery, mental health. I'm going to give you my personal goals as well, simply because as part of the community that I want to grow from this, I want there to be accountability for everybody involved, myself included. Then I'll give you a brief overview of the podcast, how it got started, what the goals are, our mission statement, and where do we want to see it go. And then we're going to give you a call to action. It's going to be short, sweet, brief intro. Should have some episodes following this so you can dig right in. If you don't want to hear me talking about myself and the podcast, you can just go straight to the content. We'll start off with what to expect. As it's said in all the marketing and the design, as I said at the beginning, this is a mental health podcast. I'm uniquely qualified to be able to discuss sobriety, addiction, and recovery because I've been through it. I am a recovered alcoholic myself. I'm very engaged with a lot of other addicts and alcoholics, some of them who are still struggling, some of them who have been recovered for a period of time, some of them who have not been recovered for long. Regardless, this is going to be a podcast that not only discusses mental health and life and difficult things that normal people struggle with, and difficult things that addicts and alcoholics struggle with. This is a platform for everybody to be able to speak. This is not going to be me standing on a stage telling you what to expect. I'm not a doctor. I'm not trained. I'm not a therapist. I don't have the credentials to be able to give you medical advice. I am a student who's trying to get his master's with a psychology degree, but I'm a real human being who has dealt with real life issues. I've had to start over multiple times. I've torn things apart. I've burned every bridge I could imagine. And then through the grace of God, I've been able to rebuild and stand back up. And it's an incredible journey. I want to not only share that with you, but I want to encourage you. If you're struggling, I want to encourage you. If you're confused, I want to encourage you. If you feel lost and hopeless, this is a place where we can discuss it. If you are an addict, alcoholic, if you're someone who struggles with substance abuse, if you're someone who's in recovery and is trying to get back out into the real world, if you're someone who's been in recovery for a while and you're struggling with wanting to go back to the temptation of the one comfort that used to seemingly alleviate your problems, which was your substance of choice. If you're a relative, a friend, if you know someone who is an addict or alcoholic, if you yourself is someone who has never taken a drink in your life, if you've never used any drugs in your life, but you struggle with anxiety, depression, loneliness, if you struggle with bipolar issues, whatever it may be, this podcast is for you. This is hopefully going to be a collaborative process along the way. Obviously, at the beginning, I'm trying to get this started up, so it's just going to be me rambling on and talking. But we do have a lot of social media platforms that I would love to connect with all of you on, suggestions on episodes, things that you're struggling with, things that we could really talk about. But that's who it's for. It's for anybody who struggles with any element of mental health, has before or knows anyone who has. This is for you. This is a community that's going to grow. It's going to be incredible. We're going to have an incredible space for people to talk and get real advice, not the Google advice, not the confusing jargon that you may hear in college textbooks, but the real life, hardcore, messy, I don't want to talk about it kind of advice. As far as me, who I am, I'm from Louisiana originally. I've been living in Texas now since 2015, so that's a really long time. And my upbringing was interesting. I have an abusive alcoholic father, and I saw that firsthand. I experienced it firsthand. I grew up with that level of trauma, and because of that, I had a mom that was under a lot of stress a lot of the time. And as the oldest son, naturally, I felt like it was my place when my dad left to step up. I was going to be the man of the house. I was going to take care of everybody. And at the age of 8, 9, 10 years old, normally what that turns into is you can quickly become a punching bag for everybody's issues. Some of that did happen. I had a lot of anger issues. I was very much a master manipulator. I learned how to work a system where I'd play my parents against one another so I can get what I wanted. I was a loose cannon who wanted to follow the rules. And so that's an interesting dynamic. Foot on the gas, foot on the brake at all times, always looking for a burnout. And I did. I reached burnout a lot. My mom has dealt with depression and a lot, we've had a lot of discussions since I've gotten sober. A lot of the way that she treated me was an extension of my father sometimes, and I completely agree. I don't agree with that, but I understand her mentality. There was a lot of when I had to go visit my dad, there would be physical abuse, emotional abuse, just this constant feeling of being unwanted. But then also, I had very loving family. I had family that brought me in. My grandparents were incredible, and my mom was too. But she was struggling with a lot. As the oldest kid, sometimes you become a therapist in a sense because you're at a young age, your mom needs someone to talk to, and your dad is an abusive, narcissistic asshole. And so your mom needs somebody. And so not only was I seen as an extension of my father, and she called me by my father's name, but also she would talk to me about things that I probably didn't need to hear about my dad. And so all of this to say, I don't hate either one of my parents. I don't hold any grudges against them. I used to, which we'll get into in a later episode. But I love both my parents, and my mom. My relationship with my mother has grown exponentially since being sober. But a lot of the issues that I have today stem from that early level of development. And then when I got into high school, I was the happy-go-lucky kid. I was mischievous, but I did pretty well. I was, I've always been blessed with a decent level of intelligence to where I could half-ass do my homework and then still somehow get an A on the test. I had a lot of good friends. I played sports nonstop. I didn't have time for drinking. I didn't get into crowds where there was drinking and partying involved. And then came college. My university that I went to was right across the street from my high school. I stayed in my hometown, and I quickly learned that I have my own money. I'm making money at a job. I'm living in my own place, and I started hanging out with older kids. And the older guys that were in college, they were, seniors, probably fifth year seniors at this point, because they had partied too much. That was the first time that I was introduced to alcohol on that level. And then I started drinking, and it was socially at first. It was fun. We'd go out to clubs on weekends. We'd get together and play drinking games, whatever the case may be. But it was like one weekend a month. And over time, by my third year in college, I found myself buying alcohol and drinking alone, because every time I would go to a party or a social event and I would drink, it was never enough. So I was the one who was drinking two to everybody's one. I was sneaking alcohol out of the house so I could hurry up and down a bottle of something just to get back inside. My tolerance level started to skyrocket. It started to become a fun game to be able to outdrink people who outweighed me by 100 pounds. And slowly but surely, my life became centered around how to get to a position where I could start drinking. When I was at work, all I could think about was when I could get off of work, go home, and start drinking. I managed a restaurant for a while, and I was one of the only ones who could legally serve alcohol. And at the end of the night, when we would close up, I'd tell everybody, y'all can go ahead and go home. I'd go in and I'd have a 32-ounce cup, and I would pour myself Johnny Walker. just straight into the cup. I'd go home at, this is 2 o'clock in the morning after the restaurant had closed, and I would drink until I passed out around 5, 6 o'clock in the morning, wake up, do it the next day. And I stayed in that pattern for quite some time. And it was at the time, you don't realize that it's a problem. You don't really have anybody telling you that it's a problem because it's not directly affecting your relationships as much. You're just slowly but surely isolating more and more. And then I moved out of my hometown and I chased a girl that I had met to Texas, and we ended up getting married. And through the course of that, again, having two sources of income, being away from anybody who could hold me accountable, the drinking really took off. When you're living with somebody 24/7, you can't really hide much. I tried, and I did hide some stuff, but as far as the drinking is concerned, that was the first time that someone had really ever pointed out to me that it was an issue. And it kept getting worse and worse and worse. It got to the point where she would confront me. This is years after we had been married. My whole personality began to change. I started to lie a whole lot more to not only my ex-wife, but I would lie to my friends. I would lie to my family. I would, convince my wife. I would say, "Here, take my keys if you're going to leave the house." And there's no way I'm going to go get anything. I mean, the closest place to go get alcohol is 2 miles away across the highway. And sure enough, I would wait for her to leave with my keys. So she had the trust in knowing that I wasn't going to drink. And then I would walk 2 miles across an interstate or across a highway to go to a gas station to load up on beer, to load up on alcohol, and to turn around and come back home. I walked 4 miles just to be able to get a buzz. And that was a pattern that lasted for a while. I was in real estate. I was drinking and driving. It was just a nightmare. This quickly turned into me making very terrible decisions that were completely out of character. I was cheating on my wife with a coworker. Because I was drunk at work too. I was drinking at work. I had a flask on me at all times, and if I didn't have a flask, I'd panic. It was just a nightmare. It's a spiral. And the drinking became more of a job, more of a chore than it did a point of pleasure. It got worse and worse. When my wife found out that I was cheating, she confronted me. I was drunk. I got physically abusive with her. And that was pretty much the end of that marriage. And then that turned into, instead of me caring enough about her and my situation to stop all that I was doing and try and get it back on track, instead I just kept on doing it more. I got kicked out of my house. I got cut out of my bank account, and I was living in my truck. I lived in my truck for probably a month, and I had lost my job. So I was homeless. I was jobless. And what little money I had left, instead of putting gas in my truck to get from point A to point B to go out on jobs, I would go to the liquor store or the gas station. I'd spend my last little bit of money that I had. Sometimes I would call my mom. I would lie to her and tell her that I need help paying an electric bill or a phone bill, and then I'll pay her back next month. I would take the money that she would send me, and I would immediately go buy alcohol. I did this with one of my best friends too. I lied to him and told him I needed to make repairs on my truck, and the money that he sent, I went and drank it all away. It was, and there wasn't even a second thought behind it. It was such an impulsive decision because I needed that escape. I felt like I needed to have that bottle, and it's tough. It's tough to survive winter in your truck with nothing but blankets and alcohol. Now, whiskey keeps you warm, but there you go. I stayed in that relationship with the woman that I cheated on my wife with, and she was a drinker as well. And a lot of our time together consisted of staying up late at night and drinking until we were both drunk. And it did not take long for the stress to pile up and for tempers to flare. And of course, same situation and scenario as with my ex-wife. The moment that she got in my face and confronted me about something, the moment that she brought something up, I would snap. I had no regard for anybody else. I couldn't control or regulate any of my emotions. I was a loose cannon, and I was making decisions that were completely irrational. And even for months, my family didn't even know that I was in this type of situation. They didn't really know how bad it was until I went to jail. My mom helped out. My mom and my stepdad got me out of my truck, got me into an apartment, and helped me get back on my feet that way. I got a job that paid really good money. All of these things just because I pulled up for just a second, and then I went right back into it, and quickly fell apart. I found myself, as someone who has never taken drugs or abused drugs, I found myself going across town to the sketchy part of town to get a bag of pills because I had convinced myself that the alcohol was too expensive and it wasn't working anymore. At this point in my life, I couldn't brush my teeth in the morning without taking shots of liquor because of my gag reflexes and the nerves and everything that I felt in the morning. I was shaking. If it had been more than a day of me not drinking, I'd start shaking and my stomach would cramp. And then I'd go right back to the bottle. I would drink and it would feel good. It feels so good. Looking back on it, I've never really had a problem of being socially accepted. But for me personally, I've always felt like a piece of garbage. And having that alcohol made me feel like a king. I felt like Superman. I could do anything. And I relied on that. And so it did not take long. In a matter of a year, I got my first DWI charge, which is the first thing I ever had on my record. I got domestic abuse, family violence charge, and so I went from someone who had the world at his fingertips to someone who became a convicted felon, and doing something that I saw my dad do to my mom growing up and being physically abusive. I became a manipulator and I tore people down emotionally, and it was a nightmare spiral for sure. And this continued on and on until I went to jail, honestly, and it got worse. And then I got out of jail, and then it kept happening. I had planned my suicide. I had convinced myself that I was just waiting for a bad day, which all my days were bad, and I was gonna end my life because I didn't know how to stop. I've always been someone who, if I set my mind to it, if I set a goal, I'm gonna go after it. I'm gonna achieve it. But this was one thing that I couldn't stop, and I couldn't figure it out, and I couldn't explain it to people because people who aren't addicts and alcoholics will tell you, "Well, just stop drinking." Um, and again, we'll dig into this in some later episodes when we're talking about the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. But if alcohol were my problem, it would have been easy enough just to stop. But my problem centers in my mind as well as my body, and I wasn't able to stop. The problem was me. So I moved out to Midland, Texas, where my family was, and thought that I'll get a new location, I'll get a new spot, new reset, that'll fix everything. Sure enough, I ended up in jail, and that was the second time, and the third time, and the last time for my drinking. I went to jail here in Midland, Texas. It's not very. I don't know what jail is comforting and welcoming. It just didn't feel good. It wasn't in a good spot. But I remember the worst part not being that I was taken away from society and from my creature comforts. It was the fact that I couldn't drink. I wasn't drinking. The withdrawals were awful. Didn't really sleep. Of course, I called my family. I was frantic and panicked, and my mom finally cut a deal with me. And she said, "I will bail you out of jail under the condition that you go to rehab." And so I did. And in my mind, I said, I'll agree with her just so I can get out of jail. But then I'm not going to rehab, but it'll get me out of jail, trying to be the master manipulator. And it all fell apart. This was the end. And so I went to rehab. When my mom came, bless her heart, I spoke to her like she was nothing. I spoke down to her so much. She did not have the money to put me into rehab, but she found a way to get it. She picked me up at 11:30 p.m. at night in Midland, Texas, and took me 5.5 hours away to go to a rehab. And she stayed in the car that night that she dropped me off because she had to withdraw the money from the bank the next day. And it was I tried to break her down. I spoke so lowly of her and to her, and I did that with everybody. Anybody who tried to help me, anybody who reached out. It's an insidious disease, and there are a lot of people who are affected by someone who is an alcoholic or an addict. And until they get healthy, they are monsters. We are monsters, and it's a very difficult, painful process to go back and look at the damage that you've caused. And again, we'll get into that in some later episodes. But so that's me in a nutshell. To let you know, that's letting you know how it was. I went to rehab. I went through a 90-day program. I went through the 12 steps. I had people that spoke to me in ways I never expected to be spoken to, broke me down to absolutely nothing in the best way possible. And then they let God build me back up. And I am who I am today because of the people that were willing to give to me what they had been given. There is no cure for alcoholism and addiction. They haven't found it yet. There are definitely controversial studies and ideas about psychedelics and how those alter your brain and whatever the case may be. Again, we'll get into that later on. But for me, I maintain the notion that there is no cure. I will always be an alcoholic, and therefore I can never drink like a normal human being ever, period. There's never a time where it's going to be okay. I can't have a couple of beers and be fine. I can't have a glass of wine and be fine. I can't do it. And in the time that I've been sober, which my sobriety date is February 1st of 2021, I've been sober ever since. And in that time, I have married a wonderful woman. We have a kid on the way. I live in a home that my wife and I own. I still have my truck. That was also my house at one point. That's currently in the shop getting worked on because that thing is old and I love it. I have more than I could ever have imagined. But the most important part of all of that is I have the freedom from myself. I have a connection with my higher power that I've never had before. Instead of having everyone else's perception of who God is, I now have my own conception. I have experience that I'm able to take and turn that into an asset to help other people who are struggling. And that has been such an incredible journey to be able to be a part of any of that, to be used in that manner. And that's where I'm at now. I'm currently trying to finish my degree. I'm trying to get my master's in psychology so I can help out on a different level, to have certain doors opened, to be able to help in addiction and recovery. And this journey has been wild. And again, I have no clue what I'm doing, but we're here. And I appreciate you for sticking through. I appreciate you for being on this journey with me. We're going to continue to dig in. I'm going to say some things about my personal life, and I hope that you see that as me trying to connect with you, and maybe you've experienced it, and that's going to help us know each other better. But we're going to navigate this together. As far as goals for me, to become a healthy husband, which I hope every day I get closer and closer to. I try, and I fail. I fail sometimes, but that's the best part, is that instead of burying it with alcohol and avoidance, I get to turn around and try it again the next day, try to be better. And that's the definition of love. Same thing with my wife. There are some days I just don't love her. I don't do a good job. And the greatest part about that is that I have the opportunity to do better the next day, and then better the day after that. It's a choice. It's not an emotion. Love is a choice. But that also goes for myself. How do I love myself better than I did the day before? My goals are to finish school finally, to be able to get a degree and to pursue a career path where I'm able to help people in addiction and recovery and mental health. That's also, we'll go into this later on, but that's step 12, is helping others. I'm going to turn what I've been through, and I'm going to give others freely what was given freely to me. I'm going to continue to help, continue to pour out. That's what we're here for anyways. I genuinely believe that. And that's what I know that I'm here for. It took me 34 years, 31 years to figure out, what God's plan was for me. And here I am. And then to become a father, to be a father that is good. Just to be a good dad, and just the fact that, I have that opportunity is, I don't deserve it. I'm really grateful. A brief overview of the podcast, what we have in store. The reason this podcast is starting is because, one, there are a lot of elements of me going through what I've been through in life as a recovered alcoholic, but then also as someone who's a student of psychology now, and someone who has sponsored people, someone who has been sponsored, someone who has been through a recovery program, but then also someone who's very in tune with the way that mental health is dealt with on a daily basis from a societal standpoint, the way that people are educating others, the people who have platforms like athletes and actors who are finally coming out and talking about this. This podcast has started from a passion, a love for other people, a desire to do everything and anything that I can to help those who suffer in silence with an insidious disease such as alcoholism and addiction, or anxiety or depression, or whatever the case may be. I want people to be able to talk about it. And sure, you could say that the more we talk about our problems, the more the problems exist, maybe. But then also there's a community aspect, a communal aspect of us being able to get together and say, oh, wait, I'm screwed up too. And let me tell you what, if you're one of the incredible ones on the face of the planet who are fucked up and continue to move forward every single day, kudos to you. You're a warrior, you're a superhero, and this is a place for you to hang out. If you're someone who's been hurt by someone who has mental illnesses, mental issues, whatever the case may be, alcoholism and addiction, this is a place for you too. I've seen that side of it, and I've been on that side of it. And before my alcoholism took hold, I was affected very deeply by an alcoholic. And so we're here for that too. But that's how this started. It's just straight passion from the heart, and wanting to reach out and help. As far as the goals of this podcast are concerned, I want to develop a community. I want to be able to have a space where people feel like they can talk about anything with mental health. You don't have to hide in the shadows. You don't have to suffer in silence. You don't have to run away. You don't have to feel bad for the way that you are. This is a place for you. This is a community that's going to be built just directly for any of you who are struggling with that. I know I can only speak from a male's perspective. I'm never going to be someone who tells you that I understand it from a female's perspective, because I don't. But this is also a place where I hope a community like this can grow. I do plan on having other speakers come on here, people who are trained professionals, people who are educated, doctors, other psychologists, people who work in rehab programs, sponsors, sponsees, people who are in the midst of addiction, people who are out of it and recovered. This is going to be a platform where there are going to be a lot of different avenues, and people who aren't addicts and alcoholics at all. I want this to be a place where we're bridging the gap from normal society to addiction, mental health, alcoholism, whatever the case may be. Where I want to see this go, I would love to see this grow into something that is a tool, because that's all I am at the end of the day. I'm not a trained professional. I don't know everything. I would love to continue to be used in whatever way I feel called to be used. Same thing goes with this platform. I would love for this platform to be used in whatever way that looks like. And that's the goal. I want to see it get there. I'm not going to put a timestamp on it, but I'm going to let you guys know, I'm not good at any of this. I'm working on it. I'm learning as I go. The amount of times I'm wearing out Google to figure out how to edit a video, how to edit audio, how to post something, it would surprise you. I know nothing. And I know that everybody says this and it's kind of cliche. If I could do it, you can too, kind of thing. But when I tell you that I absolutely know nothing, I mean that. So this brings us to the call to action. And what I'm going to do is have this set up. What the plan is to release this episode. This is just the intro episode of letting you know who I am and what this podcast is and where we want to go with it. But I'm going to have social media set up as well. I'm going to try and do short video, just little clips here and there. Sometimes those tend to be more effective and reach a broader audience than just podcasting. But this will be a podcast that should be on all of your typical podcast platforms, iTunes podcasts. Hopefully it'll be on Spotify as well. And then we'll be on YouTube. Then we'll also be on TikTok, Twitter, and I think Facebook for sure. So there'll be a lot of different avenues for you to reach out and communicate. I want to be able to have you all feel comfortable enough to say, what you're struggling with, and we'll talk about it on the next episode. If it's something that's pertinent and you just want somebody to talk to, I will make myself available. I can't promise you that I'll be available at specific times. Again, I'm a full-time student and a kid on the way, and I'm a full-time husband. But I'll make time one way or the other. And we'll sit down and we can have a phone conversation. We can have a video call, whatever it is. But I would love it if you all could help me out by spreading the word for this podcast. I would love it if you could reach out on socials and connect with me, follow. Go ahead and link up however you can. Don't miss an episode. It helps me if you're listening to know what I need to be putting out there. And most importantly, if you're just a lurker and you want to come by and hear the podcast every now and then, or you just want to consume whatever I'm putting out there, turn around and help other people. Focus on helping others. Because I promise you, if you're struggling, I promise you, without a shadow of a doubt, if you're struggling, if you're hurting, if you're confused, and you find a way to genuinely help somebody else, it's going to take all of your attention off of yourself. That doesn't have to be sitting down and helping them navigate through life's problems, solve any problems. It could be just helping someone carry their groceries. It could be seeing someone, seeing your neighbor with a flat tire and walking over and saying, hey, do you mind if you want some help? Anything I could do? Go mow somebody's yard just for shits and giggles. That's what you can do. And that's going to be the biggest call to action at the end of every episode that I can give you. Regardless, if you've stuck around this long, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for beginning this journey with me. I'm terrified. I really am. But I'm excited that we're kicking this off. And remember, moving forward, this is about progress, not perfection. Keep your head up, keep your heart open, and we'll see you next time.